News Radio is Boyd Matheson, the opinion page editor for the Deseret News, former chief of staff of Mike Lee, the senator. And as we'd mentioned earlier, you were working on a column about Barbara Bush when the announcement came out about 5:40, a half an hour ago. And we thank you for coming here into the studio to share some of your memories of Barbara Bush.
Yeah, she filled such an interesting role as First Lady, being kind of pigeonholed between Nancy Reagan, her predecessor, and Hillary Clinton, who followed her to the First Lady's chair, is really an interesting role. But because she didn't have the grace and the kind of the fashion style of Nancy Reagan, nor did she have the need to be in the middle of it all like Hillary Clinton. So she played a very interesting role. She was just kind of a rock. She was a brick there in terms of the Washington space for her family, and always fiercely defensive there. Always spoke her mind, even when she didn't agree with her husband or with her son when he was president. She wasn't afraid to make those kinds of statements. In fact, she at one college graduation, she said to the graduates, maybe one of you in here will someday follow me and support your spouse in the White House. And whoever it is, I wish him luck, which was very Barbara Bush-esque.
You mentioned Nancy Reagan on the one side, Hillary Clinton on the other. But I remember about Nancy Reagan, there were those on the left who criticized her. Certainly from the right, Hillary Clinton took a lot of abuse. Barbara Bush, never. I don't remember it.
Yeah, not nearly so much, because she was just there. For her, it was family first. And so she stayed out of the headlines because she wasn't worried about getting designer clothes or new china for the White House, nor was she worried about being in the policy meetings with the president. She felt she had a role to play that was different from the Oval Office, and so she steered clear of that. And I think that helped people say, wow, here's someone who supports her family, here's someone who's passionate about the country, here's someone who's focused on literacy and lifting other people, and it made her much more likable.
Jeff Kaplan here on KSL News Radio, along with Boyd Matheson from the Deseret News, and we are glad to have as a guest now joining us live, Doug Wright, who I'm sure has recollections of Barbara Bush, having covered so many Republican conventions. Doug, hi.
How Barbara Bush was just amazing. Boyd stated it so well. She walked such an interesting fine line, and she was beloved by virtually everyone, including people that occasionally, and I just so recently read the book 41 by George W. Bush about his father, George Herbert Walker Bush, and it's impossible for him to tell the story of his dad without him telling the story of his mom. And it was such, I remember the book called Partners in Power about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, and as Boyd pointed out, Hillary Clinton's position in the power position was so much more obvious, but it is so clear when you read anything about the Bush family. The matriarchy in that family was an essential element. It was a whole different thing than Nancy Reagan or of Hillary Clinton. But boy, I'll tell you, being the matriarch of honestly one of the most powerful and prolific political families in the history of our nation, and so much of it is because of Barbara Bush. Bill Clinton stole the word that I was going to use to best describe Barbara Bush, and that is feisty. That came up over and over and over in George W. Bush's book on his dad, just how feisty his mom was. And I mentioned a little earlier, even when she'd take a swipe at somebody occasionally, she did it with such incredible grace, and the few times that her temper really shone through, often, if there was offense taken, the very first person to call and apologize was Barbara Bush. I just have an enormous respect for this woman, just an amazing woman. And plus, how many women can you name in all of United States history who was the wife of a president and the mother of a president? It's only Abigail Adams, and she didn't live to see it all happen.
That's right, Doug, and it's interesting too that I think that feistiness that you mentioned was also what grounded the family, because I think they knew that her feistiness was not contained just for the press or for the the opposition, but she was willing to uncork on each member of the family if they needed to be brought down a notch or two. So I think she kept them very grounded in terms of, hey, this is about service, because for her it was all about service. And I think that was an important grounding mechanism both to Bush 41 and 43 and to the rest of the kids in their different activities as well.
Well, and it was so important, too, in the support of the family and the various roles. And that's something that comes through very, very clear in books about her husband, books about her kids, what she was willing to do for and roll with that family. I mean, going down into Midland, Texas, in basically the middle of nowhere, and supporting her husband during the oil years in Texas, going over to China. And both she and George Herbert Walker Bush, they got around in China. There's some great photographs and great stories of them on their bicycles, and even being given the gift of bicycles, because it was noted by Chinese leadership how down to earth the Bushes truly were. And remember, that was an interesting time in China because we didn't officially have an ambassador. And Boyd, maybe you can help me. I can't remember what the title was. It consul? What was it? It wasn't officially the ambassadorship.
I think it was he was the liaison.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you look at the grace. I mean, she followed George Herbert Walker Bush all over the world, but yet still just stayed down to earth, stayed the supportive woman, and the woman that cut her own swath. And you mentioned literacy a little bit earlier. What she did, some of the personal stories, some of the outreaches that woman did to enhance and promote literacy, not just among kids, but among adults as well.
Yeah, and I think that grace had an authenticity to it because she was her self-deprecating humor was always present. She always teased about her white hair and her pearls, and that she was old, and that she wasn't this or that. And so there was an authenticity that, again, I think because she was sandwiched between the Reagans and the Clintons, that authenticity really rang true, and I think did carve out a very unique space for Barbara Bush in American history.
The recollections flood in as we learn of the death of Barbara Bush today at the age of 92. Jeff Kaplan here on KSL News Radio at 6:19 with Boyd Matheson. Doug Wright is with us, and our coverage continues now with Maria Chaleos.
Jeff, former First Lady Barbara Bush died today. She was 92. She was First Lady of the United States from 1989 to 1993 and the mother of George W. Bush, the 43rd president. No one was more amazed by that than she was.
My dream for our family has always been they'd grow up, they'd get a good education, they'd be happily married, or they'd find someone they could be happy with, and that they would not think they were entitled, that they would work.
The former First Lady was remembered for being fiercely loyal.
I hated it when anyone criticized my brilliant husband, and I'm furious when they criticize my son.
And now more on her life from ABC's Karen Travers in Washington.
Mrs. Bush held the Bible as her husband was sworn in as the nation's 41st president.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
As First Lady, she promoted reading, chairing the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. She combined her love for books with her affection for her English Springer Spaniel, Millie, with the bestseller Millie's Book, A Dog's Eye View of the White House.
Reaction is coming in from all over the world, including here in Utah. KSL News Radio's Brianna Bodley has more from the newsroom. Brianna?
So much love and support for Barbara Bush and her family today. Here are just a few of the reactions on Twitter, Maria. First, President Trump took to Twitter saying, in part, she will be long remembered for her strong devotion to country and family, both of which she served unfailingly well. Representative Mia Love said Barbara Bush was a great First Lady and a loving, devoted wife and mother. Senator Hatch saying, today we lost a woman of wit, grace, humility, and humor. Through the eloquence of her example, Barbara Bush has inspired us all to be the best version of ourselves. And Mitt Romney, Barbara raised a family of service and character, stood by her beloved husband in the best and worst of times, and spoke her convictions with courage and passion. The great first lady of our times. Live, Brianna Bodley, KSL News Radio.
And Barbara Bush was known for being down to earth and known for her sense of humor.
That same fellow that I used to yell at to please pick up his room, to see him as president is truly amazing.
Barbara Bush died today. She was 92 years old.